I call this meeting of the HR Committee to order. It's Monday, June 26th. It's 5:35. We are at Nashua High School North, and Mrs. Oden will call the roll.
Mrs. Ziem?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden?
Here.
Dr. Murataki?
Here.
And Mrs. Hohensee is here. Mrs. O'Gara is here. And Mr. Farrington is here.
And our candidate, Jason Tassini, is here. Welcome. We're certainly glad to have you. We're anxious to hear from you tonight, and so we're going to have this in public, right? Yeah. So that being the case, I will ask my esteemed board members if they have questions for our candidate.
Okay.
Scare him to death. Throws for the listening public. Jason has been working at Bishop Girton, so we're happy to announce that we're going to take some of their good staff. So, did I see your hand, Mrs. Oden?
Yes, I did. Congratulations on being a finalist here.
Thank you.
I have a question. I know assistant principals do a lot of disciplining, and you were in Nashua. You left and went to Bishop Girton. Not saying from where, but can you tell me one of the most difficult discipline cases you handled, and looking back, how you might handle it differently if you weren't happy with the results?
I'll answer it two ways, if you don't mind. In general, I think some of the most significant discipline scenarios I've ever dealt with is when you're considering whether or not a young person in a private school, in a private sector school, can remain in that school community, where they violated a rule, or the issue is so great that you might consider uninviting that student. So potentially things, drugs, alcohol, et cetera, are all major issues. When I look back on any of those types of incidents that I have dealt with, generally speaking, I've been very satisfied with the results, because I believe we worked at a process, and when I say we, myself, the student's parents, other members of administration, if teachers are involved, whoever's involved in the disciplinary scenario, worked extremely hard to figure out the best solution possible. And when you're student-focused in that discipline, I think the outcomes are generally going to be pretty good. It doesn't mean to say that there aren't bumps in the road, because you know, parents naturally want to protect their child, defend their child. And I think you need to be able to work with the family, hear their concerns, hear their side of it. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it's going to go, but you allow both sides to explain the scenario. And then if you can transition the incident into something that is learning-based, there's a lesson coming out of it, it's a teachable moment, et cetera. And I think at that point, when working with a parent, they realize you've got their child's best interest in mind as well. Even though the information you're talking about can be extremely difficult, hard to hear. Having children of my own, I know when the school calls me and says my son has done something, sometimes it's very hard to hear. Thankfully, he's only in third grade, and we're not talking about some of these major issues. But when it's third grade things, or whether it's high school things or middle school things, it is challenging to hear. So I think you have to have, from an administrative standpoint, you have to have a sensitivity to that in working with families. In terms of doing things differently, I always sit back and reflect on these, and these types of scenarios really weigh on me heavily. It's a young person. This is probably the worst, quote unquote, worst day of their life to that point that they're involved in a major discipline scenario. I don't ever feel good when parties walk away feeling as though things were done intentionally to one another to hurt one another. That's not the object of that scenario. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes you can't bring another party to a mediated agreement. And as the school administrator, you need to be able to stand for what is there in the policies and defending what the school or the district needs at that point. And sometimes, not everybody's going to agree. So sometimes I look back early on in that situation. How did I enter into the conversation with the student? How did I enter into conversation with the parent? Is there a different method by which I could have done that? Is there different wording I could have used? Did I send an email when I should have made a phone call? Those kinds of things to personalize it maybe early on would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Mortaki?
Yes, thank you. Welcome to the district interview. I think we've actually crossed paths once. We may have been at Riviera at the same time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I took right around the time that you were just about to graduate from the master's program, I was taking a course before I was elected to the school board in 2009 in curriculum and instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very interesting course. So I don't know if I think you took that course because you needed it in order to get that major, that concentration. The second thing is that as part of that class, we had to do these student assessment exercises where we actually go into a school and we run through some, teacher or classroom assessment exercises, and then we basically debrief. I did mine at Pennychuck Middle School. So I actually got to, meet a number of the teacher teams, and it's a very interesting school. And then I coupled that with your background at BG as the vice principal for advancement, which I think is an interesting position because now you are drawing people from the community, which may in fact have included some graduates of the Pennychuck Middle School. I'm not sure if you had any of them, but maybe you did. So there's that connection. You're now going to be crossing the divide onto the feeder side of the secondary school equation.
Sure. Yep.
So how do you plan on jumping across that division? Because middle school and high school, there's an interesting difference. So how do you, plan on getting your experience on the high school side too?
Yeah, it's almost, as I've been thinking about it over the last few weeks, and I think it's almost like backward planning, understanding by design model. I know what the outcomes are. I know what's expected at the secondary level. I'm able to come in and help students, teachers, wherever it's needed, to see those outcomes of what does a successful rising 8th grader into their freshman year of high school look like? What skills will they need 2, 3, 4 years down the road to be successful high school students? And perhaps we can start integrating some of those expectations or some of those skills into the curriculum at Pennychuck, giving our students perhaps an advantage, giving them a leg up when they're getting out of school as 8th graders and moving up to North, that they'll be ready to go. And again, as I mentioned, I did my student teaching in 8th grade. It's actually where I really thought I wanted to be in middle school. I really enjoyed that time. I think it's a really fun transition. Students are thinking that they're old enough, that they know it all, they're ready to go. But at the same time, they're very open to a period of formation and still learning from an adult. And I think they very much enjoy when a faculty member, or a teacher, or administrator, an adult takes a keen interest in them, a genuine interest in them, and wants to help them progress and meet whatever goals that they want to meet. So I think at the outset, that's a great advantage to have that, to help them see that path of success from middle school to high school.
Follow up?
Yes.
my kids basically went through the Catholic grade school system and Catholic junior high, or at least for my two older ones. So my two youngest didn't transition into Nashua Catholic. They actually wanted to go start public elementary school, and so they basically came in around the 5th, 6th grade. One big surprise to my wife and me was when my young son and daughter explained that they weren't supposed to be doing flashcards. Now, here we are Catholic school parents, and we are used to working with our children, drilling them in what's now called math facts, drilling them in spelling, drilling them in grammar. And my two youngest kids told me, Mommy, Daddy, we're not supposed to do that. Our teacher scolded us when we told them that we're doing well and because we're drilling with our parents. I couldn't believe it, neither could my wife. So next time we actually had a parent-teacher meeting, lo and behold, my wife and I had the same experience. We were told by the elementary school teachers that we were not supposed to be forcing young children to memorize anything, which explains why 3 generations of public school kids have been crippled in terms of things like math facts and speed and accuracy, what have you. So the reason I bring the story up is that we have fixed some of that in Nashua. And as you enter into the middle school area, we think that the first cohort of the fix is moving into the middle schools. So you may actually see I believe the leading edge of that change, that cohort, has already moved into middle schools. But we're getting more and more of those guys going into the middle schools, the ones that started in kindergarten and 1st grade being permitted to memorize math facts and spelling and grammar and what have you. I think if you take this job, you'll be at an interesting point, especially with your experience in advancement, because you'll be able to take the children that are benefiting from that realization, that early learning. You really do need to work on the memorization, especially in K1, 2, 3.
Sure.
And you're getting that wave coming into the national middle schools. You have the expectation of what a high school advancement should look like and what that handover from the middle schools to the high schools ideally would look like. So I think you'll have an interesting situation going on. So what do you think? Have you thought about how you take the transitional cohort and maybe take advantage of that? I don't know if that's something you've given thought to.
Sure. I mean, you can't build a house without a solid foundation.
Right.
And so, the middle school years, and certainly the way the structure here in the district is organized, that you've got feeder to the end result in the high school. So you have this middle school game where in 3 very short years, you have to take what is the raw materials, if you will, that are coming into you in that 6th grade year, and you've really got to flip them around or advance them to a point where they're really ready to go in the 8th grade year. So any work that's done at the elementary, kindergarten, pre-K, anything all the way up that helps build that solid foundation, I think is a great advantage to those middle schools. 3 years is a very short time period to have a good significant effect on the learning growth of a young person. So you have to take in, ascertain very quickly how that young learner is doing, and then get them on the correct path to get them moving forward. So that is exciting. I think that's exciting for the city to look at that elementary level, kindergarten through elementary level, and see that kind of growth. I think that's really fantastic. I'm looking forward to that.
I've got other questions, but I think others should have a turn, so.
I guess I'll take a stab at this.
Sure.
I'm assuming that Bishop Gorton doesn't have a lot of poverty.
I wouldn't assume that. I would not assume that.
No?
Yeah,
Oh.
no, I would not assume
Well,
that.
we do, I'm sure you know that in the district, we have 44% are on free and reduced lunch. We have, I hear all kind of varying figures on homeless children. I think documented, the last time I heard it was 180 to 200, but I've heard some people say they think we have as many as 500. Having said that, do you see that as a difficult transition for you, or certainly a change?
Well, again, I go back, I was in the district for 8 years teaching before moving over to BEG, so I'm very familiar with the Nashua community in and of itself. And I will say, my first day of students at Bishop Guertin, I was on the phone with the SROs here, dealing with a student who had spent the last few days living in his car. So, that the fact that exists is certainly not foreign to me. It's nothing new to me. And in my time in the district, working with some of those students who, it was a great thing that they were able to get up in the morning and come to school, were some of the students that I worked very closely with and connected well with in my time at Nashua High and Nashua High South. So I'm looking forward to being able to work with a more varied group of students, identifying those students who are in some of the most critical needs, such as that. I think it's, when you're wondering where your next meal is coming from, I think it's hard to focus on whatever math class or science class you got going on that day. So taking care of some of those needs and how we can work to alleviate some of those concerns is really rewarding stuff.
We're very proud of our staff in that area. I hear so many stories of how they put a sandwich in Johnny's knapsack so that on Saturday when you get hungry, remember Mrs. Smith put a little sandwich in there for you. So, and those are very touching, rewarding.
No doubt.
Nice to know that. Are there other questions? Mr. Farrington?
Well, I find myself in the same position as people who may be watching this, as I don't have your resume. Could you tell us a little bit about what time you've spent in the Nashua School District prior to that, and how long you've been at BG?
Yep. Let's see, I think it was 2000 when I first started at Nashua High, and then transitioned into Nashua. My microphone, should I turn it on? So came in as a social studies teacher and spent my whole time at the South site during the transition. So worked my way up to department chair. So when we first started, we were building the sophomore school. It was only grades 10 through 12. So my first kind of days of experience of working were jumping right into these team meetings, creating vision statements, mission statements, really jumping in to be part of something very new to the city, certainly to the high school. So it was thrilling. It was exhilarating. So as a very young educator, I was given a lot of responsibility and trust to help formulate these new ideas. So I felt very much part of the process from the get-go. As that time transitioned, helped facilitate some of the 9th grade transition from the junior highs into the high schools as we built the 2 high schools. I stayed with the sophomores at the South site during the construction. And then when Nashua South was created, was the social studies department chair. And at the time it was finishing up my master's degree, and an opportunity came along to join the Bishop Guertin administration. And I was ready I think it was just kind of ready for a new adventure at the time, and thought I'd give it a try. And so in July of 2008, was hired at Bishop Guertin, and I've been there since.
Time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yes, it does.
So if I could continue. So what do you think the biggest challenge is going to be going into a middle school? And, they're just a bunch of kids. I mean, everybody likes to say they're the hardest group, but I think all different ages are difficult at different times. So for you, it's a transition again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the keys in working with middle school students is to increase your level of patience and things like that. It's their brain. You just have to understand where their brains are. A high school student's brain is very different than a middle school student's brain. Very different than a young adult's brain. None of which can always make great decisions, but if you go into it and understanding that. I think you can help steer them along. What I think I'm most intrigued by at the middle school level is still that level of malleability to the personality and to who that student can be, and I think you can have a real profound impact on people in that age group. They're not wholly formed yet into who they're going to be as high school students, and to be able to have an opportunity to do that is really tremendous.
Okay, just one more. So if I got it correctly, you spent about half of your career in the classroom and about half in administration. What do you miss from the classroom?
I miss, from the classroom. I miss that day-to-day interaction with a young person, because I think you really get to know that person well. You can, if you've done a nice job as a teacher, George, you can walk into the class, and by the look on your face or your body language, I'm going to know what kind of class we're going to have together. It takes time. You've got to be willing to notice those things. But I think you build these relationships with students that can last a lifetime. My wife's a teacher as well, and when we were first dating and whatnot, you talk, well, what kind of teacher do you want to be? Do you want to be that kind of teacher that's liked? Everyone just likes you. It's cool to go to your class and it's fun, or do you want to be that teacher that is respected, and sometimes that respect comes years later. Sometimes it's immediate, and I think we both agree we want to be that person that's always respected. So that person that you can set that hard line, teach that hard lesson, but yet that's going to be rewarded in a student. It could be 20 years later, writing you a note and saying, I never had that opportunity to say thank you, or to say, it's at some reunion or something like that. You taught me something that has been so invaluable to me, or you may not have even known. You made a difference in my day that day. You knew I walked in, was having a bad day, something happened to the cat or, the family dog or something like that. And you kind of just gave me that 10, 15, 20 minutes to be by myself, collect my thoughts. And, I always appreciated that. So in administration, you don't get that day-to-day interaction that allows you to form the relationships that you can as the classroom teacher. But I do see that as a challenge to get out there and to try to form some of those relationships. You've got to be out there. Those students need to know who you are well before they walk into your office for a disciplinary issue, or you're dealing with a challenging situation. If it's, if you're foreign to them, this whole situation just gets exacerbated. They get very nervous.
Thank you.
Dr. Mortaki.
Okay, I turned it on, there's no booping.
Temporarily, anyway.
Okay, so in our high schools, we're just beginning to implement a 16 career track program, which is the high school end of what do you want to be when you grow up. And it has a wide range of things, some of which are careers that really require a four-year college and beyond. Others are 2-year college and then work experience. Others are more traditional trade union type things, where you graduate high school, you enter as an apprentice, you then become a journeyman and then a master.
Yep.
And others are basically just careers that you immediately leave secondary school. So the thing is, my recollection of BG is that it's more of a college prep school.
Sure.
So I'm guessing that most of the students and their parents are expecting that the career tracks that their students will be going in, they're probably hoping that they're going to be, 4-year college and beyond. But here at the middle school, what the high school faculty understand and the guidance is that in order for the career track program to succeed, you have to start in the middle school. There has to be an expectation set at the middle school level of what do I want to be when I grow up, and kind of explore the possibilities. So have you had any experience with, career track programs as the advancement vice principal? And if so, how do you think you can help the high schools with this program at the middle school level?
Well, I do appreciate your comment about exploring options. I think one of the challenges today is that sometimes we have to remember that we don't major in anything in high school. We don't major in anything in middle school. So, because you get a C on your history exam, it doesn't mean you can't be a lawyer. It doesn't mean you can't, I think, so there's a level of that I get a little cautious about sometimes, that when we're talking about career exploration, I hope that the emphasis is on the exploration. I know the variety of plan tests and other things that you can take, and you come back and this list of careers comes. Wait a minute, I'm going to be I'm going to be this, or I'm going to be that. That's not. I have no idea. I don't want to do that. So I think the biggest thing to emphasize are the skills behind all of that. The analytical reading, the critical reading, the writing, and some of the, certainly in some careers, the math and science skills that are needed to be successful. I think if the focus is on that, and then showing how those skills allow you to go forth in a certain area of study or profession, I think helps everybody. I think that's a really overwhelming thing for a young person to say, oh, I have to be this, or I'm going down this way. But what if my junior year in high school, I see my friends over in this area over here? Right. Can I get over there, or am I too far gone, in this pathway to leap over? I'm not sure what the exact data is now, but I know that colleges and students changing majors is quite frequent. So I think it's okay. I think we have to balance that. We need to be thinking about where we want to go. We need to identify what are our skills and aptitudes that we have now as young students that are helpful for us. Where are we excelling? Where are we challenged? How can we bridge those gaps in order to be successful in the long run? So I think that's a good part of it. When I was teaching, when we first started with the sophomore school, one of the things. In fact, Keith Richard and I worked on together was creating a job shadowing program. And so that when we first initiated, every single sophomore at Nashua High, went out and created their own job shadow. They did it on their own. And man, was that an invaluable experience. I still bump into kids today around town. I remember I job shadowed this, and one kid ended up becoming a fireman, and that's what he did. It just confirmed for me. And other kids went, "Whoa, I thought I was this is what I wanted to do. I went there, and oh man, I'm never doing this again." So I think having an eye towards career exploration is fantastic. I think you need to give kids a taste of it as they're going through their schooling years. But I hope that it's always done with that notion of exploration in mind, and that they're not set. I know I wasn't. Being in education was not on my plate when I was in college. It's not what I was thinking about as an undergrad. Thankful it has become that, but so those skills, the skills were transferable.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. You're absolutely right about the explorations. And I know in my own experience, I was actually part of an internship program at college. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even start the internship program until the end of my sophomore year. But over the next 3 years was a combined program that led to a 5-year master's degree. It really cemented in my mind what I did and did not want to do as an engineer growing up.
Yeah.
And that's in college, so you're absolutely right. But part of the problem, I believe, is that there are certain kinds of skills and certain types of reach job, kind of careers that students in middle school may not realize that they really, really, really ought to be hitting the books in math if they want to be doing certain kinds of careers.
Sure.
So I think part of the idea is that, as part of this partnership between the middle schools and the high schools, you need to prime the pump.
Yeah.
with the students to let them know, hey, you know what? If you really did want to become a rocket scientist, and rocket scientist stuff is really cool because this is the kind of things you do.
Right.
Maybe you ought to be, concentrating a little bit more and learning the math and learning the science.
Sure, yeah.
You don't have to become a total whiz, but you ought to at least be studying and passing the courses.
Yeah, I certainly think at the middle school level, having a community to careers kind of experience where you have people in a variety of careers coming in and talking about their experiences. Where do they come from? Particularly, native Nashuans and maybe people who have come up through the school systems here to come back and talk about their experiences and how they ended up in those careers. I know, we do a similar. I've organized a similar day at Bishop Girton for alumni to come back and talk about their careers with our current sophomores and juniors. And it's amazing. Some people, how people talk about the career they landed in. It's not always, it's very rarely a straight linear path. It's always twists and turns, as we're all well aware of. And I think that's a great experience for outsiders to come in and talk to the students about. Students hear enough from teachers and administrators all the time. It's always great when you can bring in maybe some of those outside resources who are doing those things and talking about them. But I agree with you. Yes, you do need to start priming that pump a little bit earlier and helping students understand that there is a link to what we're doing today of where you may want to be down the road, or what mom and dad are doing, or aunts, uncles, family members, whomever.
Thank you.
I had turned that off because that beeping noise, I thought maybe if I turned it off, it would help. I just have one quick question. Did you do teacher observations? Have you, in your capacity?
Yes,
You have
yes,
done them at
yes.
Bishop Girton?
Yes.
And you are probably familiar now with our mini observations. Have you had any?
I haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but
15
it did come
minutes.
up in the earlier interview processes about shorter term, but I think we talked about maybe 15
Well, I'd
minute.
love for you to come back afterwards and share with us whether you see it as a good change.
Looking forward to it, yeah.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes. I move to approve the nomination of Jason Ticini as assistant principal at Pennachuck Middle School for the 2017-18 school year at a salary of $90,500.
Second.
Is there any discussion, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
It will now go to the full board,
Okay.
but hopefully we look forward to
All right.
seeing you and
Thank you very much.
getting to
Very
know
excited.
you. No, as I said earlier, please feel free to come back and share with the board all the great ideas you have about discipline. We're always, policy is always interested in hearing. I think it's critical to get that feedback from our staff. What are the things we need to do, and what are the things we're doing right, and what are the things we're doing wrong?
Well, it's always a
So-
continuous process of improvement. You're always looking to get better. I haven't found a school yet that's perfect, so.
No, or a human being.
No, okay,
So
right.
it was
Correct.
wonderful. Thank you for
Correct.
coming.
Thank you all very
Appreciate
much.
it so
Appreciate
much.
your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, now we're going to have our second candidate come for an interview. If you'll come over and sit down, this is Marie K. Alsop. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And
Marie's going to talk a little bit about herself.
yes, I know, and I should have apologized to you for overlooking that. George's reminder was welcomed, so thank you. Well, we appreciate your coming and look forward to working with you. Thank you so much. And Marie, as she said, please give us an introduction. Wait a minute, it's been, Marie, I'm so sorry. It's been making all kinds of ugly noises.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Is that better?
That sounds much better, yes.
I've been the assistant principal at Sunset Heights for the last 4 years. Prior to that, I do assistant principal, and I'm a curriculum specialist, the ELA elementary curriculum specialist, K through 5. So I have a split role between 2 buildings. But as a curriculum specialist, I get to go out into a lot of different buildings. Prior to that, I was a teacher in Bedford for 7 years. I a full year internship in Bedford and was hired in that position right out of my internship. And before that, I worked in business for 4 years in Boston at a tech company. Basically, I was a headhunter. I did HR and headhunting.
So, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Any? Mrs. Oden?
Hi, good evening. You have served as assistant principal at Sunset for 4 years. This is for principal. As you become principal, you will be looking for an assistant principal. What characteristics will you look at as most important for your assistant principal to have?
I'm really looking for somebody to be a good match for me. So I'm pretty concrete, sequential. I do a lot of the scheduling, different things like that. I have a pretty good handle on the curriculum, at least the ELA curriculum. So I'd be looking for somebody who I can work with and sort of kind of bounce ideas off of, but somebody maybe who has a personality that can get their pulse on the staff and kind of work with staff members. We really have a collaborative team at Sunset. Mr. Shopler and I have built that over the last 4 years, and we're very proud of that. So I'm looking for somebody who will continue that collaboration with the teachers, with the parents, and making sure that we continue that in the building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? I have, take a stab at it. First off, I'd kind of like to get a feeling from you. You were split, right?
I am.
Which I have to think might have been more difficult. Balancing those balls and keeping them.
They're two completely different positions, yes. Although prior to me being in that ELA curriculum role, Kathy Drolet was there as a full-time person. I do think it's nice to have a curriculum person that's connected to a school because you can keep your pulse on what's actually happening in the classroom with the classroom teachers, how it impacts, how my decisions in the curriculum office is impacting the classroom teachers and the students. So being able to get into classrooms and see how those decisions are playing out, what's working, what's not working. So I think in that respect, it was really helpful to have that split role. I think you'll see in the buildings where you do have a curriculum specialist / assistant principal, a lot of those schools are more connected to the curriculum. They understand the curriculum a little bit more and can be instructional leaders in their building. So I think it requires a little bit more organization. And there were certainly times where I felt pulled in both directions to do work, but it can definitely be managed.
And I assume that you did professional, observations, many observations. And
I did,
that
yes.
kind of thing. I have to think that, I guess I'm asking you if you think we do justice by having. Were you able to do, I understand that sometimes those can be quite cumbersome, that they're a lot of work.
They are. I think it is manageable. In a split role, it was a little bit more difficult because I wasn't able to have the conversations necessarily right away because I was only there 2.5 days. So it might have been a few days in between before I was able to have a conversation with the teacher. But I do like the mini observation. When I was in Bedford, I actually was a teacher who was observed by mini observations. And so I liked it when I was there, and then I was happy that that Nashua adopted that system. I think it gets away from the dog and pony show of, if people know you're coming in for an hour-long observation, they plan this really great lesson, which isn't necessarily what's going on all the time in the classroom. So me being in there for 10 minutes, I can get a pretty good gist about what's going on in the classroom, what the teachers are doing. And quite frankly, I'm usually not watching the teacher, I'm watching the kids, and I'm talking to them. So I'm sitting down next to them, what are you doing, what are you learning today, and trying to get a feel from them on what their goal for their lesson is. And if they can tell me that, then I know it's a good lesson.
Thank you, that was interesting. Mr. Farrington?
Thank you. I don't know if it was your strategy, but if it was, I don't want to compliment you on it for hanging back and letting Phil deal with all the headaches of the renovation. Someday, I'd like to sit down and talk about this Bedford connection. You taught at Bedford and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
But looking forward, how many new teachers are you going to have next fall?
Right now, we'll have an intensive needs teacher that's coming in, and then we have 2 transfers that are coming into our building that are transferring from another building we took off the transfer list. So 3 that are new to our building, and then we'll have some para-educators in our intensive needs programs. We always have some turnover there.
So, but pretty good stability.
Yes.
How are the preparations for kindergarten going?
I think they're going well. We're really excited. We actually have one of our first grade teachers is moving down into a kindergarten role, and then off the transfer list, we took another first grade teacher who's going into the kindergarten role, and then the teacher who is there currently in our kindergarten role taught first grade as well. So they all know where the kids need to be, where they're taking them, and I think it's going to be an excellent team, and we're very excited to have kindergarten. We just really feel we're not a title school, but we hover right on that border of about 40% free and reduced. And so I do feel like it's going to make a big impact in our building to be able to access the kids a little bit earlier, just get a feel for what their particular learning styles are, what works for them, and know, kind of what's coming down the pipeline as far as what we need to do to prepare for them for first grade.
Great, thank you.
And do you see this full-day kindergarten as giving you time to teach them, for them to be a little less intense and teach those social skills?
I think it will definitely help with that. We have a lot of students that were coming into first grade at Sunset Heights who had had no school exposure. Because we don't have title services and they weren't given preschool or kindergarten, they're coming into first grade not knowing how to hold a pencil, not knowing which way to flip a book. Some of them, it's a couple of days to talk with the parents about making sure that they are completely toilet trained. We've had kids come into first grade without that. So I think it will definitely help, as far as preparation, like I said, so that we can make plans for kids and introduce them to things at their level and at their pace. I think it will be helpful.
Dare I ask you another very controversial question? To some extent, I think the children that are held back at Sunset Heights, were there, in your experience in the time you've been there, were many held back? And what are your thoughts on...
We typically don't hold students back unless the parents request that they're held back. So typically that's a parental decision, and if a parent decides that that's what they would like to do, we fill out the paperwork and we help them with that process. I'm pretty open to, the parent knows what's best for their child, and kind of understands that. I know the research shows that holding a student back doesn't really make a lot of impact in the end, and sometimes it can have some detriment on their social abilities later on, especially if they're held back past second, third grade. So I think if we do a retention, it needs to be early on. Personally, I have a 8-year-old, actually just turned 9 on the 24th. He has ADHD, and when he was in kindergarten, I did hold him back into kindergarten for 1 more year because he couldn't sit. Academically, he was fine, but he could not sit. So I said, I just need to give him 1 more year. And every time he introduces himself, he will say, I'm Caden, I'm, 8 years old. I should be in 3rd grade, but my mom held me back in kindergarten. And that's how I swear he's going to be the valedictorian of the high school saying that. My mom held me back in kindergarten. And it's always my mom, not my dad or my family. It's always my mom. He knows I made that decision for him, but he'll be just fine in the end.
We all have our children who come back and remind us of those things we did. So it's, I guess.
But I think it was the best decision for him, and I wouldn't have wanted, I know him the best, and I wouldn't have wanted that school to make the decision for him, so.
Do you see many parents who actually ask about it, or do you recommend it?
We have usually 1 or 2 a year in the kindergarten, 1st grade realm. We typically, this year we do have a 2nd grade student, and the dad has talked about it every year. They're actually moving this year to a different school zone, and so he thought it would be a good time because he won't be with the same peer group anymore. He'll be moving to a different school in the district. So I think he's also a September birthday. He just made the cutoff, and he's small. So I think it probably is the right decision for their family.
Yes, we held back. We had a son and I still hear about it too. So he graduated college and everything else. So you're right. Some of those things, they never leave you.
No.
So are there any other board members? Dr. Mortaki.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't mean this question to sound flip, but you're going to probably chuckle at it. So having been the assistant principal / curriculum specialist, what made you want to become the principal at this school?
That's a really good question. And when I originally interviewed, I think I talked about the fact that I didn't apply for any other principal openings, although there were many this year that were open. It wasn't something that I was looking to do right now, but Phil was leaving, and Sunset Heights is a great staff. It's a great building, and I always say it's kind of that hidden jewel in the corner of Nashua. Nobody really knows about us, and we kind of keep it that way because we know we're great, and we don't want everybody coming there. But it's a really great school, and the staff they've worked really hard over the last 4 years that I've been there, making some instructional changes. They've really done a nice job. We've really formed a very collaborative team that works well together. So it's not, the classroom teacher, our special educators, our reading specialist, our ELL teacher. It's not, that's an ELL kid, only the ELL teacher will work with them. That's a reading specialist kid, only the reading specialist will work with them. We flop around our building. We've moved our schedule around so that if a student needs support, we make sure that they get that support. And without having the title services, we just have to be very creative about it. And we've been able to do that over the last 4 years, and we've made some building moves on shifting people to make sure that that collaboration happens. And I just felt for the staff and for the students in the building, especially after 2 years of construction, we needed some stability, and I really felt like I needed to step up. And it wasn't necessarily the timing. I've got 2 young boys at home, but it's the right place. So sometimes you just have to take the opportunity when it comes.
Follow up? So you mentioned without the title services. This actually is a segue into my next question. What do you expect the full-day kindergarten program will do for Sunset Heights?
I think it will, again, I think it will really allow us to take a look at the students a little bit sooner, know who's coming. When we did not have we had the halftime kindergarten, I would say more than half of our students were not registered at Sunset Heights for kindergarten because their parents needed to work. So a half-day program doesn't work for a working parent, and I certainly understand that. And so we just didn't have access to those students. And then there were other students who maybe were at home and had no exposure. Like I said, they were coming into 1st grade not holding a pencil, not knowing any letters, colors. And so being able just to expose them to the socialization piece, the play piece, get that out of the way so that when they're, come to first grade, that they're ready for some of those academic skills that are going to be coming their way.
When I think of Sunset Heights, I think of Chris Crawford, who was our student liaison. Most of you probably remember him, and a very special young man. I still hear from him. And I think of his mother.
She
because,
works
of
in our
course,
building.
She works in your building.
She does.
And she is a very special lady.
She is.
So I have to think that you have some wonderful people.
Yeah,
up
she
there.
helps with our 5th grade play. We did The Lion King this year. It was amazing. They
wow.
did, I can show you pictures of the costumes. It was amazing. They did a really great job.
Wonderful. Dr. Moritaki?
Yes, if I may follow up.
Absolutely.
So you also said something that I find interesting. Because Sunset Heights was not a full-day kindergarten before, you didn't have access to a number of students. Presumably, some of those students actually went to a different school building in order to obtain full-day kindergarten.
A private kindergarten, yeah.
And private as well. So do you expect the total number of students at Sunset Heights to go up as a result of full-day kindergarten?
Yeah, we're adding 2 additional, so we'll have 3 kindergarten classrooms total, and I'm anticipating next year we'll need 4. I think this year, because the announcement came out so late, many of the parents had already enrolled their students and had to pay a deposit and tuition for a full-day kindergarten, so they'll probably stick with that. But next year, I'm anticipating that we'll need 4, because right now we're full at 3.
Thank you.
Mr. Farrington?
In the not-too-distant past, things were rather, tumultuous in the district with the new curriculum and not having a lot of the resources teachers wanted. Have you found that things have settled down for the teachers, that things are more stable?
I think that the curriculum team over the last 3 years has really worked to work together. And so last year, ELA took a backseat to the math because we wanted to make sure that the Eureka math was implemented and done well for the teachers. I think 4 years ago, when all 4 curriculums were done at the same time, when they rolled everything out at the same time, it was overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because people felt like they were a jack of all trades, master of none. Everything was new. So when they rolled the math out, we said we're not doing any new initiatives. It will be the math. We're going to focus on the math. Next year, the curriculum office, our goal is to roll out writing, the Lucy Calkins writing, and then the following year we'll focus on the reading. So we're kind of all taking turns as far as making sure that we can provide a year-long professional development, get deeper, and really give the teachers the professional development and the support that they need to do it well.
Okay. If I could just, excuse me, one follow-up. Eureka Math, now that you have a year of it behind you, do you have a sense that there is going to be some refinement necessary next year to better utilize the resource?
Just from speaking with Katie Sad, who really does that piece of the curriculum, yeah, I think they're tweaking things, but I think that the program, as it was in first year of implementation, I really felt like it went very well in my building. My teachers were hesitant at first, but they really did see some good results, and I think it's just now kind of refining what's going to work and making sure we're integrating those Cuisinart rods and how that's going to work for Nashua.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes. I'll move to approve the nomination of Marie Alsop as principal at Sunset Heights Elementary School for the 2017-18 school year at a salary of $93,250.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It will now go to the full board.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll see you next year.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Is there any, oh yes, personnel recommendations now. Do we have a motion for the personnel recommendations? Dr. Moritaki, can I get a motion
No.
Yeah, I know.
for the personnel recommendations? Thank you so much. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I didn't have a copy of this, but
We,
I'm going to get one, so.
here, you want, take mine.
Well, the other thing too is that other than the personnel recommendations, the only thing that's important are those two lines, right?
We did those.
Oh, I know, but
Oh.
at the
we-
full board meeting,
Yes.
Yes, but we also need this personnel recommendations to be approved,
that's
right?
all, that's actually in the board agenda. What's not in the agenda,
We have to recommend it in committee to get it to the board.
oh, I see, okay.
So if you would please,
All right, so you want me to move that the committee recommend to the full board
the approval of
Approval of-
personnel recommendations dated June
dated
26.
2017?
Is there a second? I think Mrs. Oden is abstaining, so I will make the second.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a voice vote, please.
Also, that being the case, we'll take a roll call then, right? So, Mrs. Oden,
I'm going to abstain.
so I vote yes.
I'll
Dr.
vote yes.
Moritaki, how do you vote? So that makes it pass. Thank you. Is there any further business to come before this committee?
Could we just ask, Ms. O'Gara, I wanted to get a full report as to how many positions we need to fill that are still open at each level.
Oh, yes.
Maybe we can get an email concerning that,
All right,
okay?
so seeing that Mrs. O'Gara has stepped out of the room for a moment, is there any other business to come before this board, this committee? Mrs. Oden,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.